Can a Spring Boot at-rest controller be enabled, disabled using properties? This follows the same teaching style as your earlier Spring Boot topic. Introduction. In Spring Boot applications, controllers are typically always active once the application starts. A class annotated with REST controller is automatically detected and registered as a bean, and its endpoints become available. However, in real-world applications, developers often need more flexibility. For example, enable certain APIs only in development, disable features in production, toggle APIs using feature flags, control endpoints based on configuration properties. This leads to a very common question. Can a Spring Boot at-rest controller be enabled or disabled using properties? The short answer is yes, but not directly. You need conditional configuration. This topic helps learners understand how Spring Boot loads controllers, why controllers are enabled by default, how to conditionally enable/disable them, how to use properties for feature toggling, best practices for real-world scenarios. This is a very practical Spring Boot configuration concept. What does enable/disable controller using properties mean? It means controlling whether a controller bean is created based on a configuration property. In simple terms, property value means decides whether controller exists. Example concept. Feature.userAPI enabled true means controller available. Feature.userAPI enabled false means controller not loaded. If the controller is not loaded, its endpoints do not exist at all. How Spring Boot loads controllers. Spring Boot uses component scanning. Any class annotated with REST controller is automatically registered as a bean. Example concept. Spring scans package means finds controller, means creates bean, means endpoints exposed. By default, there is no built-in property to turn a controller on/off. Why this is important. In real applications, you may want feature toggles, environment-based APIs, staged rollouts, disabling incomplete endpoints, controlling experimental features. Example concept. Same application means different features enabled depending on configuration. This is especially useful in microservices and cloud deployments. Key idea: conditional bean creation. To enable/disable a controller, you must control whether the bean is created. Spring Boot provides annotations for this, such as @conditional on property, @profile, @conditional. Example concept. Condition met means bean created. Condition not met means bean not created. Method 1. Using @conditional on property. Best approach. This is the most common and recommended way. Example controller. @rest controller. @request mapping. API users. @conditional on property. Name equals feature.userAPI.enabled. Having value equals true. Match if missing equals false. Get mapping public string get users. Return user API is enabled. Application.properties feature.userAPI.enabled true. Example concept. Property true means controller loaded. Property false means controller ignored. How it works. Spring checks the property at startup. If condition matches, means bean is created. Otherwise, means bean is skipped. Example concept. Startup means evaluate condition means decide bean creation. What is match if missing? Match if missing equals false. Means if property is missing, means controller is not created. If match if missing equals true, then missing property means controller is created. Example concept. Property missing means default behavior depends on match if missing. Method 2. Using @profile. You can enable/disable controllers based on environment profiles. Example. @rest controller, @profile dev, public class dev only controller. Get mapping dev, public string dev endpoint. Return dev only endpoint. Run with Spring profiles active dev. Example concept. Profile active means controller enabled. Profile not active means controller disabled. Method 3. Using custom conditional. You can create custom conditions for more complex logic. Example: conditional my custom condition.class.
Example concept.
Custom logic means decide controller activation. This is more advanced and used less frequently. Method 4. Using configuration class. Instead of annotating the controller directly, you can define it in a configuration class. Configuration, public class, controller config, bean, conditional on property, name equals feature.api.enabled, having value equals true, public myController. Return new myController.
Example concept.
Bean created via config means condition applied, means controller enabled, disabled. What happens when controller is disabled? If the condition is not satisfied, controller bean is not created, endpoints are not registered, requests return 404 not found.
Example concept.
Controller missing means endpoint does not exist, means client gets 404. Example scenario property feature.payment.enabled.false. Controller @REST controller @conditional on property name equals feature.payment.enabled, having value equals true, public class payment controller. Get mapping pay, public string pay, return payment enabled. Result: property equals false means pay endpoint not available. When to use this? This approach is useful for feature toggles enabling disabling APIs, A/B testing, environment-based endpoints, gradual feature rollout. Example concept. Feature flag means control API availability dynamically. Environment variable example. Feature user API enabled equals true. Maps to feature.user API enabled equals true.
Example concept.
Environment variable means Spring property, means controller enabled. Best practice. Best practices include: use conditional on property for feature toggles. Keep property names clear and meaningful. Avoid hard-coding logic inside controllers. Document feature flags. Use consistent naming, e.g., feature.enabled. Example concept. Clean configuration means flexible application behavior. Common mistakes. 1. Expecting @REST controller to support enable-disable directly. It does not. 2. Forgetting property configuration. Controller won't load if property is missing, depending on config. 3. Using wrong property name. Property mismatch means condition fails silently. 4. Not understanding match if missing can lead to unexpected behavior. 5. Mixing profiles and properties incorrectly may cause confusion in large applications. Advantages: flexible feature control, environment-based behavior, no code changes required, easy integration with DevOps pipelines, supports feature toggling. Challenges: managing multiple feature flags, keeping configuration consistent, debugging missing endpoints, understanding conditional logic. By learning this topic, you understand how Spring Boot loads controllers, why controllers are always enabled by default, how to conditionally enable-disable, how to use @conditional on property, how profiles affect controllers, how feature flags work in Spring Boot. Simple definition: enable-disable @REST controller using properties. A technique where a controller bean is conditionally created based on configuration properties using annotations like @conditional on property. Final summary: a Spring Boot @REST controller cannot be directly enabled or disabled using properties alone. However, you can achieve this by using conditional annotations like @conditional on property, name equals feature.api.enabled, having value equals true. Key ideas: controllers are beans created by Spring. Control bean creation means control endpoint availability. Use @conditional on property for feature toggles. Use @profile for environment-based control. Once you understand this, you can build flexible and configurable Spring Boot APIs.